Welcome to WatchMojo.com. I'm your host, Layla. In our interview with the writers of Transport Revolutions, Moving People and Freight Without Oil, Anthony Pearl and Richard Gilbert tell us about the relationship between transportation, oil, and conflict.
It's not going to be a smooth curve in terms of escalating prices, even though prices have been basically trending steadily upward over the last 5 years now. At some point, there could also be other political crises, and that involves military conflict over the remaining oil resources at an international scale. And at a local domestic scale, it involves local conflict and competition for access to what might not be reliable supplies. I mean, when people's SUVs become empty and they have to walk away from them or try and push them along the side of the road, there's going to be some potential for violence around filling stations. People will try to push ahead in gas lines, potentially, as happened in the 1970s. The difference today, unfortunately, in the United States is there's a lot more weaponry out on the streets. And that would prompt an adjustment by government away from just an open market. I mean, the idea of rationing can't be ruled out under those kinds of circumstances. And once you put in rationing, it can have some equity and give people basic allotment. But then all of the innovation and efficiency that comes with a flexible pricing and market-based system is put on hold. And it makes the adaptation to these transport revolutions even harder if we wait till we get to that crisis point.
We think about the United States being very dependent on Middle East oil and maybe having even invaded Iraq because of that, and certainly being concerned about Iran because of that. But China is actually more dependent on Middle East oil than the United States. Quite a bit more dependent in terms of getting imports from that part of the world. Also, China, which has historically had an armed forces that is very much focused on China and its borders, is now very rapidly developing armed forces that have an international reach. It is soon moving to have a navy as big as the United States Navy, which is huge. It is training its troops to operate in other parts of the world, Africa and the Middle East. The possibility of conflict over these resources that are vital both to China and to the US is becoming increasingly high. We're not near there yet, but the possibility is getting higher. What we really need is this to come quite a way up on the international agenda so that there can be some rational discussion about it rather than it being the 800-pound gorilla in the corner that nobody's talking about, this matter of oil depletion. The climate change agenda has taken over. In Europe, they're just beginning to say the peak oil agenda should have equal time with the climate change agenda. Worldwide, that needs to be done too.
We've put in some planning tools in the book that we think would be very valuable to redesign transportation systems based around energy. Right now, the people who are being trained and coming out and or already practicing transport planning and policy analysis, the ones who advise the politicians and give them often, we feel, short-sighted or incorrect advice, don't really have the tools to understand the energy implications of oil depletion and what that means in terms of what has to change in the transport system.